Good morning, everybody. It's Friday, another Friday under lockdown. Our lockdown has just been extended, so there's been a lot of questions about, is this season 1? Is it season 2? Do we change the name, etc.? So to make it so much easier, I've renamed the group to Lockdown Photography Sessions, or the group. So yeah, let's keep it like that
just
for
in
now.
Just in case it gets extended again. Yes,
absolutely, because we never know what's going to happen.
Sure.
I do have plans going forward for changing the name and making it a long-term thing, because I think there's a different need for these presentations and inspiration, etc. So if you think it should continue, fantastic. On the YouTube channel, like, subscribe, etc., etc. And then also share amongst your friends, everyone that loves photography, everyone that's interested in photography. Let's share the love. Today we've got Roger Machin from Canon South Africa. He's going to be talking to us about moving into movies from stills to video. I'm ecstatic that Canon has granted us the pleasure of having a sponsored presentation here. As it mentions in the description, it is sponsored by Canon. So it does refer specifically to Canon equipment, but the principles are pretty much the same. So thanks very much, Canon. Thanks, Roger. And over to you.
Thank you. Hello, guys. Again, as Quentin said, please like, share, and joining the group has been pretty damn awesome. The fact that you're well over 800 members already is downright scary, and that's in the last sort of 10 days is pretty damn amazing. The presentation's been fantastic. I was thoroughly blown away. I mean, on a Funnival yesterday afternoon, I've never shot boats in my entire life, and like you were saying about the challenge, I was like, okay, how am I going to go shoot some boats now? It's that's really motivating, and I quite like that idea. So yeah. As Quentin mentioned, this is a sponsored post. As I say, because Quentin and I are good friends and we've been working together on a variety of different functions and events over the last couple of years. Obviously, I had a vested interest in this channel and in this this activity, talking to pros and serious amateurs and enthusiasts across the entire country. What a unique platform! And I mentioned to him right from the get-go that Canon would want to be interested in sponsoring at least one or two of the type of posts, but not like a selling type of thing. So we're not here to push or promote products, but to try and do some upskilling. Now, this presentation I put together a couple of years back, and I've augmented it and modified it on a daily basis or monthly basis since then. And it was specifically aimed at store staff originally to help photographers move into video. Now, what I then realized is that there's a lot of end user photographers who are downright scared of video, downright scared of movies, who could, actually benefit from this. So it might seem a little bit basic, might seem a little bit obvious at the beginning, but it's going to cover the absolute simplest things that most photographers need when they're moving to movies. So please understand, this is sponsored and endorsed and owned by Canon, and I will mention competitors in this presentation. Please understand, when I talk about competitors, I do it with the respect of worthy competitors, and I do not knock competitors. I am, however, free to outline flaws or outline advantages that Canon may have over them. So please don't take anything that I say about competitor products as negative. It is our competitors are worthy of our respect. So again, please understand, I will mention them, but I'm not knocking them. Alrighty then. So moving on, hopefully this will do this, he says with complete confidence. Okay, well that just stopped working. Here we go. All right. Yeah, Quentin, I need you to give me a thumbs up every time my screen does change, so just make sure it is actually working. But anyways,
yeah, it's cool, Roger.
Okay.
So what might happen is if there are transitions in your slides, it sometimes takes a little bit of time to get going. But
okay,
that's changed now.
Okay, cool. So you want to start shooting video. Where do you start? What do you need? And what else do you need to know? I'm going to cover that in sort of three basic parts. Where do you start in terms of what you want to do? What do you need in terms of the gear that Canon presents? And the most important thing, what else do you need to know? This is where we're going to talk about codecs and about frame rates and compression and all that kind of story. I'm not going to go into massive depth because there is a more advanced version of this where I talk about things like bit rates, 422, lookup tables, etc., etc., etc. So This kind of stops just before you get into the major cinematic stuff, but it covers everything you kind of need for the majority of type of stuff. So where do we start? Obviously, the camera is the first thing that most people need to consider, and that's essentially where we're going to kick off. So, what do you want to shoot? And this is where you, as a stills photographer, might already be doing some of these things, and you then already have an idea. If you're shooting corporate or functions, if you're shooting weddings, if you're shooting reviews, informative stuff, you're shooting documentary, wildlife, you're shooting news, stories, movies, etc., or even vlogging for that matter, whatever you're shooting from a stills perspective should kind of lead you into what you should be shooting for video. If you're a wildlife photographer, going into a product review or wedding video is kind of like nonsensical. Stick with what you know, and you know, most stills photographers kind of think, oh, we need to do this and we need to do a bit of vlogging, we need to do that, and they jump immediately out of their comfort zone, which is kind of silly. So what you want to shoot is going to first and foremost determine what you already do and what camera gear you will need moving forward. Then you've got to indicate where do you want to sell it. So corporate wedding videos essentially go directly to the customer. Social often goes to event organizers or even sponsors. Reviews go online, YouTube, etc. Documentary, wildlife, stock libraries, even TV channels, for example. News and actuality would go directly to broadcasters. Stories, series, features, obviously also going to broadcasters. Movies can go pretty much anywhere. If you look at the Nollywood industry in Nigeria, that filmmakers actually make a movie, shoot the movie, and burn the discs and sell it directly on the street, directly to the end user. So there's no kind of middleman. So there's nothing stopping you from doing movies like that. Absolutely, free, entirely up to you. Vlogs, obviously YouTube is where vloggers have found their home, and the enormity of that channel and that platform continues to abound and continues to blow me away in terms of the content that's uploaded per second and the videos that are viewed per second. It is absolutely massive. I can't even put a number in this presentation because by the time I present it, the number's outdated. That's how fast it's moving. So what you shoot will determine the best camera you should use. If you're doing corporates and functions, you can get away with a VSLR or a small camcorder. We call them VSLRs. Essentially, it's either DSLR or a mirrorless camera that happens to be able to record video. If you have one of the older ones, pre sort of 2008, obviously they don't have the video functionality, but VSLRs is what the overwhelming majority of people do have and do use. For weddings and social, small camcorders, VSLRs, informative reviews, pretty much the same sort of thing. Documentary, wildlife, you will probably start with VSLR, but you're going to want to move into one of the E&G camcorders, specifically things like power zoom, tracking autofocus, and big 20 times zoom lenses on the cameras. Those kind of become kind of handy. When it comes to news and actuality, the small and the E&G camcorders are pretty much more critical because the professional level of audio on that. Stories, series, features, pretty much any of these. When you start looking at movies, you can get away with an E&G camcorder, but realistically you should be using one of the big cinematics. Vlogging, pretty much anything. Even a power shot, for example, even one of the little compact type cameras, mirrorless or traditional VSLRs, what the overwhelming majority of people use. Having said that, you can mix and match. You can have combinations of these. And it's one of the things I'm going to mention a little bit further along when I talk about why Canon has been able to color match between these different options. So looking at some of the the VSLRs that we have on the lineup, mid-range models, start with like the M50 and the 90D. Both of them shoot 4K off a crop sensor. We have the 60 Mark II and the 70 Mark II, both of them full HD off the 60 off the full frame sensor, the 70 also again off the crop sensor. All of these models have dual pixel autofocus and quite simple, easy to use. When we go to the mirrorless models, you have the crop sensor on the M50. It's probably one of the most popular cameras at the moment. Number one choice amongst vloggers internationally for YouTube, and overwhelming majority of vlogs shot on YouTube by non-professional filmmakers. The M50 is the camera of choice. Having said that, growing rapidly at the moment, EOS R and EOS RP, specifically because of that full frame sensor, delivering really, really good quality in a tiny camera. Going to the Pro models, our two big mamas, the 5D Mark IV and obviously the brand new 1DX Mark III. Both of these feature full frame sensors and 4K capabilities. The DX3, however, does give you 5.5K as well. So it gives you much, much, much higher quality and goes to a much higher degree. As you can see from this, it also uses two of those wonderful CF Express cards and can record simultaneously in RAW on one card and 4K compressed into the other one. I'm going to talk about RAW and compression a little bit further along, and I'm also going to talk about cards a little bit further along, but suffice it to know, when you're buying a VSLR for photography, it may well have video as a secondary function. Having said that, all of the latest cameras in the last sort of 5-6 years have put equal focus on both. So they work predominantly well as a stills photographer, but with no sacrifice whatsoever in capability for video. And the DX3 is the practical example as far as this is concerned. Epic performance as a still camera, but also phenomenal performance as a video camera. And again, that comes at a price. You've got to bear that in mind. Okay, we'll talk a little bit about cropping of the full frame sensor. A lot of our cameras are 5D4, ESR, and RP do crop from the full frame with shoot 4K in a smaller version, what we call a Super 35mm format, very similar to APS-C size. This delivers what we call dot-by-dot native recording. So what you see is essentially what you get. Majority of our competitors will actually resize the frame. So they're recording off the full 20 or 30 odd million pixel sensor and resizing down to 4K. Now 4K is around about 8 million pixels. So if you've got a sensor that's reading sort of 20, 25 million pixels, downsizing to 8 million pixels 20, 30, 40 times a second, 60 times a second, that builds up a lot of processing power. When you're using a lot of processing power, you generate a lot of heat. And what a lot of our competitors do, they drop their bit rate in order to keep the camera running cool and still downsize off that full frame sensor 30, 40, 50 times a second. They run at a lower bit rate. So when you're looking at the crop sensor, a lot of people see this as a major negative thing about Canon, and we kind of go, well, hang on a second, it's not really negative because we're not actually downscaling 30 times a second. We're only reading out the central 8 million pixels. And because we're reading those out, it means we're not using heavy processing power, so we can deliver much higher bitrate. And this example here is the EOS R compared to, for example, something like the Sony A7 III or A9 II. When they're shooting 4K, we're kicking out 480 megabits per second. And overheating is quite a major factor. If you look at cameras like our old DX2, the heat management on that, as you can see from this picture at the bottom right, there was a pipe that basically came off the back of the sensor and the processor and delivered the heat to a chamber top above the battery compartment, which is basically an aluminium heatsink, purely to dissipate the heat off that sensor. And that was a standard 4K camera running at 30 frames a second. Now the DX3's got this even bigger and even better because that's running at 5.5K. But if you look at the predominantly on our pro video cameras, they have intake and exhaust vents actually on the side of the cameras. And these are cameras with pretty much small sensors, and those exhaust vents are specifically to manage heat. And when you're running 4K, even on a small sensor, the heat that's generated over long running times becomes quite a major factor. So something to remember. Don't always see crop factor as a negative because it doesn't really change a hell of a lot other than the lens choice that you have to make. Then we have the big baby, things to come. Canon's already announced that this is in development, the EOS R5. It will have a full frame sensor. It will shoot 8K in Ultra HD across that sensor. We're going to talk about resolution shortly. 8K is kind of ridiculous. There's a lot of rumors around that this is not really possible, that this actually can't happen. That this, oh my gosh, how really? EOS R5, is that camera actually going to work? Is that going to exist? And a little bit of proof for you here. Just going to zoom in on that. Hold that in front of the camera. Unfortunately, during this lockdown period, this is the camera that I've had to play with over the last couple of weeks. Damn, I have an R5, and yes, it does do 8K, and yes, it is full frame, and yes, it runs at 30 frames a second. So that I can confirm. Nothing else. I can't confirm anything else other than that because that's been public knowledge. But the camera does exist, and it can do what it says on the box. So, hint of things to come. Right, moving swiftly along, advantages, disadvantages of using SLR or mirrorless cameras. They're relatively low cost. Even the entry-level models can shoot great video. And we've got 4K right down to the 250D and the 850D now, which is absolutely fantastic. They've got large sensors, so they're good for great, for low light. The lenses, low-cost, bright lenses, like the 50mm 1.8, for example, great for shallow depth of field and beautiful bokeh. The 50mm 1.8 is less than 2,000 Rand. What abuse. Easy to use. Majority of photographers know their way around their cameras anyway, so just finding the video on button is literally not a major factor. Already owns, as I say, most photographers already have a kit. Even if it's an old 5D3 or 5D2, the video capability is still most certainly there. And all of the latest cameras since around about 2014 have got dual pixel autofocus, which is seen as a benchmark, seen as an industry standard for autofocus. And this is one of the biggest fears that videographers or photographers moving into video have to think about is, oh my God, what if the subject's out of focus? The video is going to look bad. At the end of the day, it actually doesn't become an issue because dual pixel is most certainly there. So there are some disadvantages. There is built-in mics, but they're not great. You must look at investing in external microphones. There's no power zoom, can be jerky. So if you're turning that lens, clunk, 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 and noisy, not necessarily great. There is one lens, the 18135 Nano, this one that's on the ATD over here that has a power zoom adapter. That is pretty damn cool. And it's the only one that we have that has got the power zoom capability. You don't have a lot of audio control. There's no control levels on camera. All of it's done automatically. The preamps on Canon cameras are pretty damn good. I wouldn't say they're the best in the industry, but they are reasonably good. Some of the entry-level models don't have headphone sockets, so difficult to monitor the audio quality that you've got. And some of the older models also might have slow card slots, so they might limit the capability in terms of resolution or frames per second. And the biggest issue here is the short running times. The cameras are limited to a maximum running time of 30 minutes, or, and especially environments that we have, for example, if you're filming outdoors wildlife in the Kalahari, for example, the cameras do get hot. And even if the sensor is overheating, if the camera is overheating, even if it has got heat management within the camera, the ambient heat will also have an impact as far as that's concerned. And the cameras have got automatic shutoff facilities that will protect themselves. So you might actually find, oh, I'm only getting 4 minutes before the camera switches off. Yeah, you need to cool that down. And there are cool down systems that are available. I've seen crazy things like plastic gel freeze packs that you can wrap around your camera to keep it running at low temperatures. And if you're looking for long running times, that is an investment. But it's very rare that you should be running longer than 30 minutes on a VSLR. And again, that makes for vlogging and things like this kind of difficult. So traditional video cameras are kind of what you should be using for this kind of thing. So vlogging, this is one of the biggest things at the moment that people want to be vloggers. There was a company called Harrison did a survey among school kids in China, UK, and the United States. And the responses were kind of scary. The top things that we ask kids: what do you want to do when you finish school? In China, obviously, astronaut's still number one, teacher, musician, professional athlete, still right up there. But in the UK and the United States, number one, vlogger, YouTuber is what kids want to be. And this is kind of scary. And this is growing astronomically. Everybody thinks that they've got a story to tell. Everybody thinks that they can become the next YouTube star. And it is feasible. Make no mistake, the evidence exists that people can go from zero to hero, but understand that the competition is getting fiercer by the second. I would normally say by the hour, by the day, but YouTube, by the millisecond probably, that the competition is getting tough. So vlogging is most certainly a growing area. Canon's very, very cool as far as vlogging kits are concerned, and we are thinking of a whole bunch of different options for youngsters or for even pros or serious amateurs to go into the vlogging environment, where we started bundling little kits from as little as the 200D, the M50. Sorry. All of them come with a wide-angle lens, microphone, and some fast SD cards. Pretty damn handy if you're interested in going to the vlogging type of route. We have a really, really cool bunch of kits that are pre-made, pre-bundled. We have a partnership with a company called Rhodes. They're based in Australia. They use ethical recycling, ethical manufacturing capabilities that don't have child slave labor. So we source our microphones from Rode directly in Australia, and they are really damn good, and they are what's known as the industry standard. So check those out if you're interested in going into vlogging. We have a couple of kits that are pre-made, pre-done for you to go that route. So looking at small camcorder types, we have 3 different options in what we call the XA lineup. The XA11, which is our basic entry-level full HD using the AVC HD codec. There is also the 15 version. I'm going to talk about that. That has the extra HD SDI port that allows for multi-camera shoots. If you were looking at churches or TV productions in a smaller type environment, and you want to synchronize the cameras in terms of time code, etc., you will need the 15 because it's got that gen lock and time code. The HD SDI also pushes out raw video through that single BNC port, which is absolutely and utterly epic. So maximum level of quality with no compression. The XA40 is the first step into 4K, but it has a 2/3 inch chip. The XA50, also a 4K camera, but it now has a 1-inch chip. Just to give you a quick idea between the difference between the 40 and the 50, a 2/3 inch sensor is around about 1/4 of the size of a 1-inch sensor. So obviously the bigger sensor, we're going to talk about that in a little bit more detail further along. Bigger sensor, better low light capabilities. It does, however, mean slightly shorter zoom capabilities, but under low light performance, the 50 and the 55 perform exceptionally well. Having said that, moving into 4K, the XA40 is a really well priced option, and obviously gives you all those advantages of the small camcorders. So let's have a look at them. The relatively low costs, even the entry level like the XA11 can shoot great video. You get the power zoom, giving you very, very smooth camera moves. They're very compact. They can use in a lot of environments. I've seen people taking the handle off the top, taking the hood off the front, putting them into tubes and mounting them on the front of motorbikes, dashboards, etc. Long running times, for the most part, until the card is full. They don't stop at 30 minutes. Great for long speeches, recording functions, weddings, events, etc. The XA models all have audio control. That handle at the top there has got the balance line inputs with level controls, and you can actually control the microphone exactly and how you want. All of them got autofocus. The face tracking is very, very good. It was the precursor to dual pixel autofocus. The later models have dual pixel as a standard, but the older models like the XA11, XA15 have got the face tracking, and it is pretty damn good. It works together with the touchscreen. In a lot of cases, we've seen people holding the camera up, just touching the face you want it to track on the touchscreen, and then just pointing the camera in the right direction, and it will hold the autofocus on that person. Dual card slots, instant backup. You can on these cameras, you can either record in a relay format directly from one card. As it fills up, move over to the second card, or you can do proxy, where we have the main file on card A and a smaller, lower resolution file on card B, or you can have instant backup. So everything that's recorded on card A is matched up on card B. Viewfinders, they also have viewfinders. If you're finding that little flip out screen, which is really good quality, if you find it difficult to use in bright environments, the viewfinder is a great alternative. Some of the newer models also have Wi-Fi remote control, so you can set it up and link it directly to your tablet or your iPhone, and you can have all sorts of control from that. Fantastic for one-man operations. If I'm standing with camera A looking down the aisle at the wedding, I can have my phone connected to camera B, looking down from the right-hand side or the left-hand side or whatever it is, and I can do zoom in, zoom out, and start and stop recording from second camera just using my phone over here. There are some disadvantages. The small form factor. You wander into a wedding with a little candy bar video camera, and the bride's mother's looking at you, going, "Where's the big camera? Where's the real camera?" It's a difficult situation. I've seen it all up and down Africa. The traditional camcorders that had those big shoulder mounts and the big rig and the whole, etc., etc., etc. That's seen as a real camera. You rock up with this little candy bar, even though it's got a cute little handle on the top there with pro audio. No, where's the real camera? So customers may not take you seriously, but if you have good show reels, if you show people that this is what I've shot with this camera, they kind of go, well, okay then, but it doesn't look pro. It's one of those sad indictments of the modern world that demands smaller products. It doesn't look pro, unfortunately. The other bigger disadvantage, the smaller sensor, the depth of field is kind of large, so there's very little background blur. So it becomes something that you have to be a little bit creative with, and you have to be a little bit more careful with. to make sure that you don't have trees coming out the back of people's heads, etc. Put a little bit of distance between your subject and the background, knowing that small sensor is going to make it difficult to blur the background. Going into the ENG camcorders, we have two big models, the XF400 and the XF700. The 400 is a one-inch chip sensor, also 4K, and a lot more capable than the XF50 and 55 to all intents and purposes in terms of professional broadcasty type of features. The XF705 is our flagship, running on 4K, but also using the new HEVC codec. We'll talk about that in a second, and also being able to do HDR, so high dynamic range. As more and more computer monitors, as more and more TVs modify themselves, as resolution goes up, HDR is becoming a factor, and it will be something that you're going to start wanting to produce or supply. Right now, Joe Public, who's buying the product from you, or buying the video footage from you, HDR is not something they really need. Okay, I'm going to go through this fairly rapidly because a lot of the capabilities are exactly the same as the predecessor. However, the biggest advantage to the XF camcorder is the high bit rate. That 422 for broadcast is what most people need. Easy to use, perfect for bright environments, pretty much exactly the same as the predecessor. The only big thing here is a manual lens control with zoom, focus, and iris, that you will actually have those three wheels on the lens. Those are traditionally what pro filmmakers want, and broadcasters essentially want. And again, the only big issue here is the small sensor. However, both of our XF405 and 705 have got the 1-inch sensor. Please bear in mind that is still smaller than an APS-C size sensor. It is worth remembering that. This is how you get 20 odd times zoom lenses on these cameras. Going into cinematics, this is the best melding between a video camera and an SLR. So we have the C100 Full HD entry-level model, C200 the best middle of the range kind of product, delivering really good quality Full HD, but also being able to do 4K and in RAW. It's not as good as, for example, the C300 Mark II, which gives you 4K and cinema raw. If you're really going into movies, this is where you need to start investing. The C700, obviously our flagship in the Super 35mm sensor, that is a behemoth, that is an absolute beast. And then we have the two new babies that are even bigger than that, the C700 full frame and the C500 full frame. The C500 Mark II was released at the tail end of last year and selling like hotcakes in South Africa. When I say selling like hotcakes, we've sold 6.
That's hotcakes for that model, isn't it?
Well, for a 350,000 rand camera, then yeah, that's not bad at all. But if you're really serious about making full-length feature movies and top-of-the-line documentaries, this is where you need to go. All right, big advantages: being able to shoot at massive bit rates. Shooting raw lights. The large sensors giving you massive low light capabilities, and even the low cost bright lenses, even the 50mm 1.8 fits and works on these. Every single one of our EF lenses fits and works with no restrictions, plus also the new cinematics. So cinematic zooms, cinematic primes fit and work on these cameras as well, which is pretty damn astonishing. We now have dual pixel across the entire range. All of them have got pro audio control, and all of them have got extra viewfinder and Wi-Fi control. There are some disadvantages. I say can be expensive. The C100 doesn't, is not stupendously expensive, but when you compare it to a Full HD SLR or a Full HD video camera, it is quite pricey. But if you glued those two things together, then it's actually not. It actually comes in quite cheaper. A lot of them are very manual. For the C300 Mark II, for example, there's very little automatic settings. So if you're a beginner, you're going to be struggling. They are complicated. There are huge menu systems. The options are through the roof. And when you start looking at these type of things, as an SLR user, you're going to open this menu and go, okay, I know what the first one is, and the following 17 you're going to be very, very scared of. It is a learning curve. This is not something you should go straight into, but if you've got the money for it, by all means do. Blatant sales pitch there, sorry. Bulky, not necessarily for small environments. Having said that, as far as form factor is concerned, Canon cinema range is smaller than the vast majority of its competitors in that lineup by comparison to things like Arriflex, Red, etc. And they are seen as small by cinematic camera standards. Quick word about autofocus. Dual pixel has been the award-winning system since 2014. What people are saying online, the system is very good for moving subjects, great for adjusting focus without hunting. Game changer. We love it when people talk about these things. Dual pixel autofocus is pretty much the industry standard now as far as autofocus for video, autofocus for cinematics. And this is really, really, really interesting, because that final comment over here, most cinematographers feel the same way about autofocus today as photographers did 20 years ago, but change is coming and it has a name, Canon dual pixel. We've mastered this, and we've benchmarked it and copyrighted it and trademarked it, so it's pretty much ours. It's not saying that anybody else's system is sluggish or slow or substandard by any status at all, but this is the standard against which all others are compared. Okay, quick word about sound. George Lucas, sound and music are 50% of the entertainment in a movie. Danny Boyle, the truth is, for me, it's obvious that 70-80% of the movie is sound. Movie or sound is like another character. You have to bear this in mind. One of the first things that most photographers get wrong is underestimating the need for decent quality audio. And I cannot stress this enough. The more time you spend learning about sound and about audio and about microphones, the better it's going to be for you. And this is something that Canon has no products or no vested interest in, for example, but we know damn well it is crucial. And I think when Quentin first started doing video, one of the first things he came to me was, what should I learn first? And I was like, come back to me in 3 months' time after you've learned pro audio, and then I'll talk to you about what you need to know about video. And essentially, this is the one thing I would have to advise all of you. If you're a photographer thinking about moving into video, please, 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 please spend a lot of time looking at audio, understanding the different things about preamps, about condenser microphones, about balance line inputs, etc., etc. It will pay you long term. Make no mistake, audio is more critical than you actually give it credit for. Alrighty, so you have a camera. Now, what else do you need? Starting off, start as simply as possible. Most important thing, decent tripod is a good investment. If you already have a photographic tripod, that's great and all, but you'll have to understand, if you want to do any kind of camera moves like panning or tilting up and down, photographic tripods are not designed to be smooth. They also have this option to turn the camera vertically, which you do not do for video at all, ever, unless you're shooting with, that is not a camera, but the overwhelming majority of us watching video on the internet know immediately it's come from a phone because it's filmed like that. If you've done video for any while whatsoever, 90% of us shooting video will hold our phones like this, and it drives most people nuts because it doesn't lend itself to any of the online platforms for playing video other than YouTube. So you'll have seen footage on YouTube where the central area is clear video and the two sides are blurred to make it look sideways. That's been shot vertical. Anyway, go back to the tripod, invest. If you want to keep your legs but invest in a video fluid head, that's a good investment. Get a battery-powered video light. That's always a good advantage under low light or difficult lighting conditions. Get some fast memory cards. I cannot stress this enough. Stick with a decent brand. And, there's a lot of other brands available on the market, other names out there. Canon has a development partnership with SanDisk, and we recommend SanDisk pretty much above any other brand that's out there. It doesn't mean that any other brand is substandard. It's just the ones that we work with and we test with our cameras. They are really, really, really good. Stick with a decent brand, stick with a decent quality, and always, always, always buy the highest speed you can afford. Please understand, speed is often more important than capacity. And it's not only in terms of being able to record at high resolution for video, but also being able to play back or download footage to the computer. Slow cards might have 500 gig or 2 terabytes, whatever it is, but the amount of time that's going to take to transfer footage to a computer is just really not worth it. Also, please treat cards as consumables. They need upgrading on a regular basis. 90% of the faults that we find with cameras, with cards, etc., cards go corrupted, cards go, I've lost data, etc., etc., etc. 90% of the time it's an old card of a substandard brand, and it doesn't actually do the read and write speeds as it says on the card or on the packaging or on the box. Don't hold back on budget when it comes to cards. It is a damn fine investment, and it is worth your money. Obviously, microphone, we're going to talk into more detail about sound, but the better the quality microphone you can invest in, the better the quality of the sound you're going to get. As you start getting a little bit more advanced, you might want to start building up kits like this, for example. Essential, having good quality microphones moving further along. Matte boxes, lens hoods, pretty important for serious filmmaking type of setups, but for the average beginner, it might be a little bit overkill. The existing lens hood that comes with your SLR lens will actually be fine, will actually be sufficient. If, however, using a cinematic lens or a third-party lens, investing in a matte box or a lens hood is actually a damn good investment. Follow focus wheel. This is only critical for manual focus lenses or for cameras that don't have dual pixel autofocus. It's become one of those things that lots of people wanted originally, and now people don't really use because autofocus is so good. Tripod with fluid smooth head, as I said, absolutely essential. Sound mixer or microphone adapter, depending on the microphone that you've got. A lot of the bigger, better pro microphones have what we call balance line inputs, and our SLRs don't have balance line input sockets. So you have to get a sound stage or a sound mixer. So the pro microphone can go in here, and then that can go into the camera through the regular socket. This will work as the preamp. It will have a headphone socket, so you'll be able to see, or sorry, you'll be able to hear what the quality of the sound is. Viewfinders or magnifiers are pretty much essential for outdoor use. I see you. Very, very handy for that kind of environment. And then shoulder rigs, great for moving shots. We start getting a little bit, yeah.
Just a quick question there.
Go on.
Martin is asking, he says he uses a 5D Mark IV for wildlife, but he doesn't use dual pixel AF. Should he use it for video?
I wouldn't recommend it. Having said that, it's good for sort of controlled environments. If you're shooting, a leopard in a tree that's not moving, fantastic. If you're shooting a cheetah bailing along from left to right, etc., it might not necessarily be as good. I would recommend that Martin would buy one of these. Sorry, blatant sales pitch. The latest versions of the new cameras, EOS R5, we've announced has got animal eye control for dogs and cats and birds. This is one of the major things that I'm testing at the moment on this particular camera. And when it starts hitting the shelves later this year, you'll actually understand some of the sample pictures I shot with this before lockdown are actually going to be used as part of the advertising campaign. And dual pixel autofocus is very good for slow, gentle moving stuff, but for fast moving stuff, not there yet. Having said that, mirrorless is radically different to the new EOS R, and when the R5 hits the market, that will be a sight to behold, because that is kind of astonishing as far as that's concerned. Okay, moving along as a VSLR user, when you started getting really, really serious, windsocks on microphones, pretty damn critical outdoors. It's also known as a dead cat or windsock. There's a whole bunch of different names for these kind of things, but they essentially stop lateral wind noises on a major scale. Video lights are very important for indoor shoots. Don't underestimate the requirement for lighting. A lot of photographers make this mistake that, oh, my lens is bright enough, I'm shooting video, picture looks great, I'll go with it. If you're going to get noise in a still picture, you're going to get noise in a video image. Putting light in this kind of situation, for example, my lighting right now is atrocious. I've got a big light coming from one side and a little bit of light coming from the other. But if I'm looking straight at the camera, I've got like two side lights and very little coming on forward. So you have to bear in mind that what you would light for stills, you should light for video even better. Carry cages, these kind of handles, etc. Protect your camera if you're mounting it on a dashboard of a car, or even as crazy as the Fanikak brothers onto the roof of a car or the outside of the windscreen, to protect the camera should things fall off, etc., etc., etc. Good quality monitors for bigger productions. More often than not, if you're the cameraman with this rig, there may well be a director of photography behind you, or even a focus puller behind, off to the side of you, who needs a bigger monitor. You're looking through the viewfinder, or you're looking through a magnifier, and somebody else is looking at the big monitor on top. Okay, external recorders, grading for long shoots or backups. If you're recording onto the camera, as I say, the limitation is 29 minutes. However, if you've got an external recorder, or in this kind of situation, a transmitter, the video signal can run for even longer, and you can be setting that elsewhere. For news gathering, majority of these guys look at a smaller rig. For even whether you go to cinematics, just a viewfinder, decent microphone, good support. Sometimes you might even need an external recorder if you don't want to go to too much stuff. But a pretty lightweight package for news gathering is what the majority of people will use. In this particular situation, that big weight on the back will also double as an extended battery. So those kind of things. Canon doesn't make these, but have a look, see what is available in the market. There's a lot of the stuff out there. When it comes to cinematics, pretty much everything I've said you're going to want. You can barely, in most cases, you can barely see the camera in the middle of some of these rigs. It is kind of scary. As a practical example, this, for example, is a C700, and he's got everything attached to that, including another camera on top of the main camera, which is, I'm kind of figuring what the hell's going on here. All right, so going to the most important things, I'm going to talk about the basics, about resolution, frame rates, compression, and about editors.
Roger.
Please understand there's a lot more to this. Yeah.
Can I jump in here quickly just for a question? We've got two questions. One is as far as external monitors, the Atomos range, etc. Is there a brand that you guys recommend for an external monitor?
Canon's done bundles with Atomos on a regular basis. We like the products. They're absolutely fantastic. I own an Atomos Ninja myself. I love it to pieces. There's definitely nothing wrong with that. Having said that, I also have a small Blackmagic model. Buy what you can afford and buy what you need. Don't necessarily go and get one because you absolutely have to have one. Overwhelmingly, the external monitors now double as external recorders, and you'll slot a hard drive or an extra memory card into that. They're great for outdoor use. Make no mistake, if you shade it nicely, you can get a much better perspective than trying to look through a viewfinder or even a magnifier on the back of an SLR. So I would say the more serious you are, the better the investment it is. As I say, Blackmagic, Atomos are the two biggest brands I think out there. You said there was another question?
Yeah, and then Hamish Niven is asking, are LED ring lights good for lighting video?
Yeah, absolutely, because they're pretty much steady. The flicker you would normally get from stills photography using fluorescence or LEDs, you don't really see too much in video, and it can counteract it. Ring lights are fantastic because you can put the camera directly in the middle of it, and that is down pretty. To all intents and purposes for shooting beauty, for shooting people. And nice clean light source is the most important thing. And exactly the same as stills, mixing light, for example. If I've got a fluorescent, on my right and a tungsten on my left and daylight coming in from above, try white balance that. It's a nightmare. And as I say, stills photographers who've already been shooting digital and know the benefits of, or the understanding of white balance, do the exact same thing going into video. The LED is my primary light source. It's color balanced to 5,000 Kelvin. I've got light coming in from the window that's also 5,000 Kelvin. We're good to go. But as soon as you've got different color temperature or different lighting sources, people start looking green on the left and yellow on the right or whatever it is. Stick with it. LEDs are fantastic. The overwhelming majority of video lights are LEDs because they provide kick-ass lights, lots of color control, nice cool white color, and battery powered. Fantastic. All right, so we've got 20 minutes odd left. I'm going to talk about these four things. There is a lot more to know, but these are the absolute basics. So first things first, resolution. This is pretty damn obvious. The old PAL TVs we used to have ran at 720 by 576, ran about 600,000 pixels. Full HD, which is probably your TV at the moment, run about 2 million pixels, running at 1920 by 1080. The cinematic version of Full HD is called 2K, which run about 3.5 million pixels. Then we get what we call 4K. You have digital cinema 4K, which is slightly widescreen, UHD 4K. If you've upgraded your LED monitor or LCD screen at home to a UHD or a 4K monitor, you'll probably find it is this aspect ratio. Still technically 4K, but cinema likes a slightly wider mode. Then we have 8K, and these are relative sizes. If you think about it, full HD is a quarter of 4K and is a 16th of 8K. PAL, original standard TV, is 64 times smaller than 8K. 64 times smaller. So when people say, oh, we must have 8K, it's 30 odd million pixels, running 30 million pixels, 20, 30, 40, 50 times a second, you'll know exactly how hard you're pushing that camera and how much heat's going to be generated, etc. So 8K is most certainly kind of ludicrous. The overwhelming majority of people want full HD, and people will shoot in 4K and edit down to full HD. So resolution is linked to sensor size. And this is something you have to bear in mind in the greater scheme of things. What the majority of people, the majority of things are filmed on these days, either a 1-inch sensor or a 2/3 of an inch sensor, all the way up to full frame. If you've got 4K on APS-C, or if you've got 4K on full frame, obviously there's a difference in performance. So 4K on APS-C versus 4K on a 2/3 inch, the pixel size is essentially different. So the higher resolution you want, the higher the size of sensor you really should aim for. And you have to have this as an understanding. If you've got 4K on your 1-inch camera, the depth of field is going to become an issue, and that small sensor is something you have to bear in mind. You still have to understand. It will also affect dynamic range, will also affect low light performance, and will also affect bokeh in the greater scheme of things. If you can, the bigger the sensor you can go to, the better off you're going to be. That's, it applies for videos much as it applies for stills. So frame rates. Majority of TV frame rates are controlled by what traditional TV was. Europe and Africa runs on PAL, which run about 25 frames a second. NTSC, which is the US and Japan, nice round number at 29.97. That's kind of interesting. Most film or most movies run at 24 frames a second, but can vary. The Hobbit runs at 48 frames a second. Gives you a beautiful, clear picture, but can appear unrealistically. The overwhelming majority of stuff on YouTube is shot at either 25 or 30, which is PAL or NTSC. The American vloggers seem to think they like shooting at 24 because it gives a cinematic look. I can't believe that because, to be honest with you, I don't know a single person, even pro filmmakers, who can tell the difference between 24 frames a second and 25 frames a second. You might well be able to tell the difference between 30 and 24, but realistic, I don't see it myself. Overwhelmingly, the human eye can't see more than 14 frames a second, and internet videos normally run at about 15 frames a second to maximize file size, and it goes back to bandwidth. It can look like it's flickering at much higher resolution, so keep your frame rate high. Higher frame rates can allow slow motion effects, so recording at 50, playing back at 25 gives you 1 second of time stretched into 2 seconds. Now, this is where we come to the major factor that controls the next 3 things we're going to talk about. The 2 things that you have to think about when shooting video are image quality and file size. Those 2 factors work together with each other. If you need to send an image, a video very, very quickly to the internet, you need small file size. If you go to a small file size, image quality comes down. If you want to go for maximum image quality for the maximum resolution video that you've got, your file size is going to become bigger, and therefore sending or transmitting or editing becomes a lot more hinky. If you're filming something like a wedding, for example, do you really need 50 frames a second? Are you going to be slow-moing any type of any of the footage? Well, 90% of what you're filming at a wedding, you're not. So leave it at 25. 25 is absolutely fantastic. Don't shoot at 50 unless you're shooting slow-mo, because you're going to double your file size, double the amount of editing time, double the amount of rendering time, double the amount of importing time, because the file size is so much bigger. You got 50 frames in a second versus 25. You don't need more than 25 unless you're doing slow-mo. So this is one of your first considerations. First things first, choose 4K. Secondly, do I need 50 frames a second? If you're shooting sports, action, the wonderful skaters in the park, BMXs, etc., by all means, then go up to 50 frames a second, but no, you're going to have fat file sizes. For the wedding, for example, everything you film, 25 frames a second is fantastic. However, when they're throwing the bouquet or whatever there's action that's happening, switch over to 50 to be able to do that slow-mo as Granny knocks mother-in-law and falls onto the floor, etc. You want that in slow-mo, by all means switch to 50. And that's all you really need to know about frame rates in the greater scheme of things. If you want slow-mo, shoot higher rates. If you want smaller file sizes, shoot lower frame rates. The only other thing that you also have to look at is interlaced versus progressive. You see 50i or 50p. Most TV frames are not comprised of 25 full frames, more like around about 50 fields a second. A field is exactly half a frame utilizing alternate lines of video signal. So lines 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, lines 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, those are what we call interlaced. It's normally used for broadcasting, running at 50i, as it permits much lower file sizes, making it a lot easier to transmit files across the internet. Progressive is much higher quality because you're not only getting 50 frames a second, you're recording the entire frame itself, needs a lot more processing power, needs bigger memory cards, and it gives you much larger file sizes. Again, what do you want to do with the footage afterwards? If you want to transmit, go to I. If you want to save and do big film movie productions, go to P. Codecs, the last section over here, quite literally code decode. There's a lot of factors out there. This is what the camera uses to make the file sizes smaller. By comparison to RAW and JPEG, this is pretty much the same sort of thing. All of our VSLRs run on a compression. All of them run at MPEG-4. Or the later conversions that use H.264 or AVC. This is what's used by most commonly in video cameras. MPEG-4 is a much smaller file size, great for sharing on the internet. However, it works very much the same as a JPEG in that it does crush the quality. AVC CHD is most common in camcorders, but you can vary the bit rates, vary the data stream from as small as 3 megabits per second up to as high as 35 megabits per second. Most recent versions will also offer MP4, which is very, very handy for YouTube. The later 4K cameras like the XF705 use H.265. This is the next generation. It allows mega 4K kind of resolution in a much smaller file size. However, the codec isn't really accepted as yet. Then the last thing, all-I intra or inter frame compression. Some of you might have seen this on your camera. It says all-I or IPB. IPB will record a single frame at the front, a smaller frame in the middle, and then just guess a lot of the stuff in between. So if I've got a guy standing in front of a wall and he's just waving his arm is moving up and down, but overwhelmingly the majority of him is not moving a hell of a lot. Intra-frame or IPB is great because it records him as the master frame in the front and then just records the only differences in the back. So these are all the B and P frames. It gives you a much smaller file size, but there are artifacts that can come in because it is guessing in some cases. So if you want a small file size for transmitting, for sharing very, very quickly, by all means use IPB. If you want maximum resolution, great quality where every single frame is recorded, the full amount of information, then go all I. And again, like I said right at the beginning, higher quality or big file size. All I gives you higher quality, but then your file size is big. IPB, lower quality, smaller file size. Quite simple. All right, editing software. Canon provides a lot of our codecs and a lot of our compressions to the 4 major manufacturers out there: Adobe, Apple, Grass Valley, and Avid. Premiere is very, very popular on PC platforms because Intel and NVIDIA working very, very well together. Final Cut Pro, obviously the master choice on Apple. Having said that, DaVinci Resolve is growing rapidly. This is a very, very clever move by Blackmagic to make the software available as a freebie. And the basic editing capabilities for DaVinci are fantastic. And as a free package, what an absolute pleasure. DaVinci is also the standard that most people use for grading, for color matching. Yeah, but those are the things that happen out there. I'm now limited as far as time is concerned, so I'm going to do the Canon story very, very quickly. What we call the image quality trio, the 3 most important factors that Canon uses, 3 vital components: lens, sensor, and processor. Understand that Canon makes all of these 3 individually ourselves. We build these processors, we build these sensors, we build these lenses specifically for our cameras, and made completely in-house by Canon. And the main reason why we've put this presentation together, why Canon, we've had a bit of history. We've been making movie cameras since the 1950s. Things like the Cine 8mm, 16mm, even the first generation of 8mm video cameras, where the camera was only half of what you had to carry around. The recorder was a separate thing that you had on your hip. Depending on your age, you might have remembered seeing an uncle or a weird granddad walking around with those big recorders on the hip, and sometimes even with an extension lead going into the house to be able to run it off mains. Quite hysterical, really. We invested heavily in video in the 80s and the 90s, not only doing 8mm but also high 8. EX1 H1 high was used in crazy productions. A guy called Robert Rodriguez did his first movie, El Mariachi, on an EX1 high, which was absolutely hysterical. High 8 was crazy. Video, XL1, Canon won an interesting award at the Cannes Porn Film Festival for this particular camera. We don't admit it. We don't tell people about it. The award is hidden in a cupboard somewhere very, very nicely out of sight, because the skin tones on the XL1 were absolutely fantastic. And when you're shooting movies where skin is more important than clothing, XL1 was one of the starters for Canon's color science, and we don't really publicly announce that, but moving swiftly along. Okay, the experience we have from a photographic point of view, EOS system right now, the largest selling and the largest lens camera accessory system in the world, overwhelmingly bigger than every single other manufacturer. The EF mount is standard in many industries, including cinema, which is why Red, Blackmagic, etc. make cameras with the Canon EF bayonet, because there are so many lenses out there. We celebrated the 30th anniversary of that back in 2017. Up until now, we'd produced over 140 million EF lenses. There's 80 lenses in the current lineup. That 90 million is a little bit dated. As of the end of 2019, we'd actually produced 100 million EF cameras. This is absolutely huge. Having the 100 million EOS cameras out there and 140 million lenses in the market means there's not only an enormity of products that are available to you new, but an enormity of products that are available to you secondhand. And when you combine those two histories, we get this thing called the world changer. The 5D Mark II came out in 2008. We missed the world's first SLR with video to Nikon D90 by 7 days, and we had to change all of our marketing materials to say the world's first SLR with full HD video. We did that in a 5-day time turnaround. The 5D2 changed the world dramatically. As a full frame, full HD camcorder, VSLR, it was used in an inordinate amount of environments we never planned on. We never saw this coming. Footage was used in TV series like House, full-length feature movies like Iron Man 2, Black Swan, TV commercials for Volkswagen, DAG, etc., etc., etc. The 5D was used in an enormous amount of high-quality productions, and it changed the world dramatically. And we've never had a product like this. A year into its life cycle, we still had 50,000 units on back order worldwide. We've never had a product like this. Normally, the first 3 months is when you have back orders. After you get past the initial demands, things kind of slow down. We had to double and triple and quadruple production runs to try and keep up with the demand for the 5D2. Absolutely astonishing. And the end result was Cinema EOS, which is where Canon is now standing very, very firmly. All the 6 documentaries that were nominated for an Academy Award this year, all 6 of them were shot on Canon cinematic cameras or lenses. And we now have a very, very extensive range of not only cinematic cameras, but cinematic lenses. And it leads you to think of where to from here. And this is something that we showed as a concept back in 2015, 2016, which is cinematic camera that had to be modified to do 8K. At the time, it had 4 4K recorders, each one of them recording a quarter of the image. As you can see, look at the massive pipes come out the side of that camera to go into each one of these separate recorders, then combined to go to our 8K reference monitors. They gave us magnifying glasses to be able to look at the screen. You needed a magnifying glass to be able to see the pixels. It's absolutely scary. We showed this 5 years ago. Hint of things to come, and I'm going to remind people that is in the pipeline. So that's what I have to talk about today. just going to do that. Last thing, Canon offers a 2-year warranty in South Africa, and we have Canon Pro services through our partners, Camera Tech. All of our Pro video cameras come with guaranteed turnaround times and access to loan units. And this is from the XA11 upwards. Any of those cameras, you get qualified for Pro services. All right, that's it. Any questions?
Well, I think we, thanks very much, Roger. I think we've got generously a minute left. We might get cut off a little bit sooner than that. So well done on filling the...
Told you.
If it does cut off, I just want to first say thank you very much, Roger, for joining us today and providing the presentation. It was fantastic.
To Canon for sponsoring it.
Absolutely, yes, that too. I know that from a point of view of my transition to video, the learning curve is absolutely vertical, extremely tough, you know. But a lot of stuff coming from stills, I know and understand, and that has really helped me. So I just wanted to say thank you very much to yourself and to Canon South Africa.
Cool.
And yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure. If you wouldn't mind just having a look at the comments,
we'll go
on
and answering some questions. Yeah,
I know Hamish has asked about you know, some bits and pieces there. Yeah, that'd be fantastic. So yeah, thank you very much, Roger. Really appreciate it.
No stress. If I've got another 30 seconds, I'm going to just say to you, I'm busy working on an advanced settings where I'm going to talk about 422 and bit rates and color and lookup tables, LUTs, etc., etc., etc. When that's good and ready, I'll let you know. I've got lots of time over the next another 3 weeks to put these things together. I'm also going to do a tips and techniques for photographers moving into video. Things like you know, the 4-shot sequence, things like getting production assistants to write down notes while you're filming, storyboarding, and things like, you know, not hose piping, the basics of filming, you know, video rather than photography. We have a tendency to try and zoom in and zoom out and try and follow the action. There's a lot of hints and tips I can give you as far as that's concerned. So that'll be next step. This is just the basic intro. But I'll check out the questions. As always, thanks for hosting this. This is really, really awesome. And I hope it's the first of the Canon sponsored. And I hope we can have some other brand sponsored content to make sure that you see that we see the value in this. You've got 800 people who are to us.
We are 900
audience.
We're
900 photographers. What we would consider as a captive audience. I'm willing to use Canon budget, Canon marketing spend to sponsor the possibility for us to talk to them. Please don't underestimate this, and I hope that the likes of Fuji, Nikon, Sony, Manfrotto, SanDisk, everybody else listens to this and gets on and starts putting money back into this in whatever way we possibly can. And as I say, we want to do it just to shore up the industry a little bit and help you out where we can.
Fantastic. Thanks, Roger. I appreciate you as always. And yeah, I'll chat to you soon. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. Cut.